Good day, everyone, and first of all, many thanks to the organizers for inviting me to participate in this conference. As my research generally focuses on Byzantine medical texts, I've been concentrating very intensely upon the subject of Byzantine Christian anthropology, combined with some special and genuinely Byzantine form of Renaissance of Iatrosophism, which means some kind of professionalized medical philosophy originally developed in late antique Alexandria. Especially the treatise about the structure of the human body, Theophilos and Meletios, by some otherwise unknown or maybe unspecified Theophilos, possibly compiled in the end of 9th or beginning of 10th century and representing some special and clearly Byzantine form of Christian anthropology, covers all variations of this development. Related to my current research, I've noticed some very clear indications for an uninterrupted continuity of the idea of Iatrosophism from late antique Alexandria until late Byzantine times, somehow even further continued during post-Byzantine times. In this development, Middle Byzantine Christian anthropology, and especially the mentioned Theophilos text, plays a highly important role, for which I will give some examples in my paper. Byzantine medical literature reveals two decisive basic constituents: tradition and innovation. The continuous development of these two factors being intertwined closely until late Byzantine epoch, Petrus Valianatos recently emphasized in a very detailed analysis. The traditional element within Byzantine medicine is shaped by the late antique reception of a selection of Galenic writings, together with writings from the Corpus Hippocraticum. Already as early as in Hippocratic medicine, the close connection between body and soul, soma and psyche, is focused in detail, as Beate Gundert, Philipp van der Eijk, and Chiara Thumiger have been able to show in their detailed analysis of primarily antique and late antique sources, which however have also an important impact on Byzantine source situation. In summary, one might rightly state that the holistic view of the human being as symbiosis of body and soul already played an essential role in ancient medicine, and therefore, ideally, therapeutical concepts always should embrace and unite both disciplines, philosophy and medicine. Galen's ideal of a medical philosophy deepens the connection between philosophy and medicine and also adds a huge amount of Platonism. His specification found its climax and first institutional implementation in later antique Alexandria, where some physician philosophers, the so-called Iatrosophists, employed medical theory alongside dialectics, thus creating an educational and scientific ideal which was then passed forward not only in the whole of the Byzantine epoch, but that also remained authoritative in the post-Byzantine age. In the Byzantine medical manuscripts, in turn, the denomination Iatrosophistes as the description of a person employing exactly this specific method occurs on numerous occasions. Also, one should bear in mind that the methodological focus tends to vary, and thus it is epoch-specific. Having been used primarily for study purposes and as a kind of guidelines for the next generation of physicians, the so-called Pedes Iatron, medical reference works undoubtedly are dominated by the traditional element. In parallel to them, there exists a large number of individual writings that are mainly focused on diagnostics and therapeutics and can be located directly within a practically oriented, often even clinical setting with clear emphasis on the empirical innovative element. In most of the cases, these texts are handed down anonymously and are strongly connected with Byzantine hospital culture, the so-called hospital manuals, Xenonica Biblia. They contain diagnostic rules, meticulous descriptions of complex symptoms, as well as dietary rules and therapeutical or even surgical instructions, and very often show a professional cross-cultural dialogue between Byzantine and foreign physicians, where again the combination of medicine and philosophy plays a significant role. Under this aspect, Byzantium indeed forms some kind of a crossing point for mutual medical and philosophical influences between a broad range of different medical traditions with varying strengths of impact, for example, from the Arabic, Syrian, Persian, Jewish and Latin regions, possibly also from the Slavonic or Caucasian countries. And a lot of these medical traditions still are largely unexplored. A significant part of this group of hospital texts also contains various forms of recipe literature, giving origin to a long tradition of so-called iatrosophia that reaches far into post-Byzantine times, with occasional extensions as far as even the 20th century. The fact that all these recipe books, mainly destined for private use and therefore not circulating in a strictly professional setting, are referred to as iatrosophia, shows even there the duration of the late antique ideal of medical philosophy, iatrosophism, even in times and surroundings when political and intellectual circumstances had changed significantly. Therefore, the innovative part of Byzantine medical literature, which undoubtedly was intended for practical use, is characterized both by its relentless effort in continuously evaluating and actualizing the relevant texts and by the integration of many influences and achievements resulting from a cross-cultural transfer of knowledge. This fact is very important for analyzing and understanding the manuscript tradition of these texts, showing the marks of such a continuous evaluation in form of clauses, scholia, and margins, explaining terminological matters, intensifying and explaining statements, adding new forms of therapeutical concepts or case histories, and last but not least, introducing new specimina of materia medica. During late antiquity, between the end of the 4th century and the beginning of the 5th century, a very remarkable literary genre emerged, which united the disciplines of philosophy, theology, and medicine, the so-called Christian anthropology. The focus on men as the central object of research, already a central point of Alexandrian philosophy, led successively and especially against the background of Galen's postulate of iatrosophism to a constant transformation and further development of the originally purely practically and therapeutically oriented medicine into a scientific and mainly theoretical discipline, a medical philosophy. Text exegesis and commentary now were dominated by the philosophical guidelines of logic and dialectics. The same form of interaction can also be observed within contemporary Christian theology, whose argumentation not only made similar use of medical exemplar, but also assigned to medicine an important place within the all-embracing divine plan, starting with cosmological interference up to the metaphor of Christus Medicus. The basic ideas of Christian anthropology are the analogy between the macrocosm of the universe and the human being, characterized as a microcosm reflecting this macrocosm, the anthropocentrism, stating the singular position of man being the final aim of divine creation, the emphasis of the divine image of man and connected with a theological analysis of the nature of Christ, the idea of the human compositum being settled between terrestrial and transcendent existence, symbolized by the dualism of body and soul. These fundamental ideas are based on a primarily Neoplatonically influenced intellectual historical background, using a multitude of medical exemplar and metaphors, which are primarily taken from Galen's writings, especially from the Usubacium, but also from his anatomical treatises. Christian anthropology includes main subjects of Alexandrian philosophy as well, For example, the doctrine of the elements and spheres and the omnipresent pronia of the demiurge. In combination with Galen's physiological teleology represented in his treatise De Usurpatium, this constitutes the fundament for Byzantine Christian anthropology. During Middle Byzantine times, the Alexandrian Iatrosophism again gained significance, especially under consideration of new text reductions within the medical literature and in connection with an increasing professionalization of the hospital system. Christian anthropology constitutes an important part of this development as it became essential for practical medical ethics applied in everyday medical praxis. The main representatives of this special Byzantine form of Christian anthropology are two treatises with corresponding title, Peritis to Anthropocatas Kevis, probably having their origin in the 9th century and being attributed to one Theophilos and one Meletios. With the Theophilos and Meletios traditions' possible datation, still a lot of questions are connected and currently are dating into the 9th century is assumed to be the most probable, but the discussion is not yet concluded. Essential here is the term kataskevi because it refers to a compilation with transcendent aim in the sense of Christian anthropology as well as to a medical anatomical environment. The spectrum of meaning of kataskevi ranges from a basic meaning in the sense of production, fabrication, constitution, up to creation and construction within Aristoteles. Since Origenes, kataskevi describes the structure and constitution and therefore the true nature of a creature, and was finally put into relation with the nature of Christ, which is the truly Byzantine aspect. Therefore, the term kataskevi developed to some kind of keyword within Christian anthropology, especially during Byzantine times. Both treatises, Theophilos as well as Meletios, represent the Byzantine reception of Christian anthropology and the transfer of its thought patterns into a professional medical setting, shaped by the structures of Byzantine hospital institutions. The fact that the Meletios text has been almost immediately epitomized by an Iatrosophist named Leon is representative of the professional interest of Byzantine medicine in Christian anthropology, especially during Middle Byzantine times. Therefore, it is not surprising at all that in the 9th century, starting from the Byzantine preoccupation with Christian anthropology, it found a lively echo in many other languages and cultural surroundings. Byzantine Christian anthropology considers Galen's treatise De Usurpatium as a very important source because of its teleological orientation, which suggests and supports an interpretation in the Christian sense. The mere replacement of Galen's concept of nature as the creating instance by the Christian concept of God allows an almost complete adaptation of the Galenic text to the purposes of Christian anthropology. Within the Theophilos redaction, quite seldomly the term physis still is maintained, as the selected examples show. With its representative synthesis of Platonic, Aristotelian, and Stoic natural philosophy, Galen's De Usurpatium constitutes the main textual foundation for the mutual intertwining of medicine, philosophy, and theology. A comparison of the before-mentioned two representatives of Byzantine Christian anthropology shows remarkable differences between the two texts. The differences lie in the formal structure and technique of compilation, but also, and more importantly, in the use of sources, which shows clearly the different focusing. This observation allows to connect each text with various branches of Byzantine medical activity, one being more theoretically and also philosophically centered, while the other one emphasizes the context of daily practice and didactics. According to the Theophilos text, only a detailed insight into the anatomical structure of the human body can bring about its complete understanding, equally theologically and medically, and finally to elaborate the optimal therapeutical concepts fitting to the constitution of the individual patients. For this reason, the Theophilos text enjoyed an important afterlife in the 16th century, when numerous versions of its Latin translation were published and used as crucial evidence in the theological debates against the doctrine of metempsychosis. Byzantine Christian anthropology is strongly connected to its respective setting inside a more or less institutionalized medical surrounding. Some representatives, like the Meletios text, emphasize the field of medical ethics, while others, like the Theophilos text, are deeply involved in some sort of hospital intern didactic curriculum, explaining the structure of the human body within Christian anthropological terms, but also with a special focus in teaching a precise medical terminology on the basis of textual and visual material. Both redactions, however, are representatives of a genuine Byzantine development of medical philosophy, Iatrosophism. For the Theophilos redaction, the Platonic doctrine of trichotomy in Galen's medical adaptation constitutes the main structure of the treatise. Its 5 books are arranged around a central part, books 2 until 4, where the correlation of the 3 parts of the soul to the corresponding central body organs, the brain, the heart, and the liver, is built gradually. The second book deals with the epithematikon, including nutrition, digestion, and distribution of the nutrients inside the body, as well as the production of blood in the liver. The third book explains the themikon settled in the heart and describes the vital power supplied by the heart as well as the respiration. Finally, the fourth book explains the hegemonikon, being the brain that contains the logistikon. The first and fifth book, each of the two consisting of 2 parts, frame the central part by dealing with the extremities of the body, arms and legs in book 1, spine and the reproductive organs in book 5. The connection between the 2 parts of the frame is established by the so-called complex body parts, ta periectica. In relation to this system, Theophilos introduces a new classification of the body parts that focuses on their physical and psychical impact. The periectica moria insofar are special because they combine the physical and psychical qualities. And this classification of the body parts does not correspond at all to the usual and originally Stoic practice of classifying the body parts in homeomery and unhomeomery. Theophilos defines the human being, therefore, as a well-balanced combination of body and a rational soul, being a key passage of this text. And this is this text passage here, written here. And therefore, he continuously stresses the difference of a soul logikon, housing within his body the soul, being some kind of representative of the divine element inside the whole human being to the aloga soa. And being a soul logikon also includes an obligation towards its creator. While Nemesius explains this obligation explicitly, Theophilos reduces the argumentation to its essential aspect. Man's upright posture, indifference to the structure of the aloga soa, obliges him to use this quality for praising the Lord. The Theophilos text emphasizes, therefore, to a high degree the anatomical facts behind anthropocentrism. Quite in contrary to the representatives of the animal world, the anatomically established upright body posture of man alone is significant for his predestination as center of creation but also for the obligations connected with this position. Speaking about medical philosophy, medical ethics, and medicine between body and soul, Byzantine Christian anthropology marks a stage of development which must not be underestimated. The special nature of Byzantine Iatrosophism and the relevant sources leave no doubt that Byzantine Christian anthropology, as represented by Theophilos and Meletios, plays a key role in the further development of Byzantine medical philosophy in general. And when finally in late Byzantine era, Ioannes Zacharias strongly upholds the opinion that practical knowledge and clinical experience alone were not sufficient to exercise the medical profession in a responsible and diligent way, then such a statement is only possible against the background of a continuous and dynamic development as initiated by Byzantine Christian anthropology. Moreover, with this statement, Ioannes Zacharias demonstrates that in the truest sense he was a successor of the Alexandrian Iatrosophists, and iatrosophists, the philosophers, which means an effective physician and outstanding philosopher. Although he felt very enthusiastic about philosophical questions, he consciously made the decision to embrace medical profession as a task that is useful to society. With this clear positioning, he emphasizes another essential factor in the interaction between medicine and philosophy, the consideration of the social and ethical relevance. Thank you very much for your interest and for listening to this presentation.